What happens when the largest ship in the world begins its death plunge into the icy Atlantic? At 2 a.m. on April 15th, 1912, Titanic was no longer a luxury liner. It was a sinking mountain of steel, carrying more than 1,500 souls who had nowhere left to run. No lifeboats remained, no escape, only the cold, black ocean waiting below. But how did the final minutes unfold? And what did those trapped on board do in the face of certain death? The clock ticked past 2 a.m. The bow of Titanic was already deep underwater. The stern lifted higher and higher, towering into the night sky. From lifeboats drifting in the distance, survivors looked back in horror. The sight was unforgettable. Titanic no longer looked like a ship. She looked like the wounded beast, thrashing in its last agony. On deck, the once calm atmosphere of wealth and elegance was gone. Passengers clung to railings. Families huddled together. Many prayed. Others screamed. And some simply stood in silence, unable to move, as if frozen in time. Through the terror, one sound still floated across the Atlantic night. Music. Titanic's band, led by Wallace Hartley, continued to play. Violins, cellos, a soft hymn rising above the chaos. Survivors later swore the last song they heard was "Nearer, My God, to Thee." Imagine it. In the darkness, with death surrounding them, the musicians refused to flee. They played on until the very end. Their courage became legend. Far below deck, unseen by most, the engineers and firemen fought to keep Titanic alive. Steam hissed, metal groaned, water surged through flooding compartments. Yet these men stayed at their posts. They kept the lights burning. They kept the pumps running. Without them, Titanic would have gone under far sooner. They knew they were sacrificing their lives. And still, they worked, because every extra minute gave one more chance for someone above to survive. At 2:15 a.m., the stern lifted higher, tilting at a terrifying angle. Passengers clung desperately to anything they could hold. Deck chairs slid. A grand piano crashed down a hallway. People began to slip, tumbling toward the bow. Some jumped into the freezing sea. Others held on, hoping for a miracle that would never come. And then, the ship gave a deep, thunderous groan. A sound survivors said they would never forget. Titanic was breaking. Steel twisted. Decks cracked open. In one violent moment, Titanic split in two. The bow, already submerged, tore away and sank into the darkness. Screams echoed across the night as people were dragged under with it. But the stern, it remained afloat, rising even higher into the sky. For a brief moment, It looked as if it might hold. Survivors in the lifeboats gasped. Could part of Titanic still survive? But the ocean was merciless. At 2:18 a.m., the stern stood almost vertical. Imagine being there, clinging to railings, staring straight down into black nothingness, the entire weight of Titanic towering above you. People were crushed, others leapt, falling hundreds of feet into the icy sea. Then, silence shattered. The stern began its final dive. Slowly at first, then faster. Faster until Titanic disappeared beneath the waves. The once unsinkable ship was gone. It had taken just 2 hours and 40 minutes. The sea was suddenly empty. Where Titanic had stood, only black water remained. But the silence was not quiet. It was filled with the cries of over 1,000 people struggling in the freezing Atlantic. Survivors in lifeboats described the sound as unbearable, a chorus of agony, stretching into the night. And then, one by one, the voices faded. The cold claimed them. Within minutes, the ocean was still. From their lifeboats, the survivors stared at the spot where Titanic had vanished. A ship of dreams, gone forever. They were adrift in the freezing night, surrounded by darkness and death, waiting for rescue. Some whispered prayers, others could not speak at all. But the story wasn't over, because now began the long hours of waiting, hours that would decide who lived and who would never see the sunrise again. Titanic had finally slipped beneath the sea. More than 1,500 lives lost in a single night. The greatest ship ever built, destroyed by the very ocean it was meant to conquer. But the question is, what happened to those left floating in the darkness? Who survived the freezing waters? And how did the rescue unfold in the hours that followed? Join me in the next chapter, Chapter 7, Rescue and Aftermath, as we follow the desperate struggle for survival in the cold, Black Sea. Because the sinking of Titanic was only the beginning of the tragedy.